Yo, what's up, gamers? It is Counter-Strike Christmas, and by that I mean it is Pickems time, of course, for the major. Just dropped, got the pass, and ready to go for, of course, stage 1, as we're now getting. The nomenclature changes all the time for these, but we got stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 playoffs. So, I mean, I think we can get behind that. Probably, possibly, one of the best coins we've ever had. This is hella cool, very Texas themed. Cowboy hat is out to go along with that. So yeah, we're feeling it. Bit of a shame couldn't make it to Austin. You know, I really did try, but it's a bit expensive to get across and having a bit of trouble with fundage. But that is the world of esports, unfortunately. Either way, that's not what we're here for, of course. Maybe I choose team. Let's choose team. BB. I like BB graffiti, but, you know, it doesn't matter too much. Let's have a look down the list here and make some decisions, I suppose. Stage 1, I think, coming into this year and the new circuit finally getting going now, it's obviously been very, very explosive. Vitality are going to be the big name in this one. Spirit, of course, can they defend their title? But none of those teams are really involved in this stage. That'll be, you know, part 2 or 3, I suppose. Probably into part 3, I guess, as you can see with the teams here that have been able to skip through. So we don't have this like massive jam-packed first couple of stages and whatnot. It is once again separated a bit further like it used to be a few years ago. Right, so moving into things. I don't usually do a little bit of a meta thing, but I just took a second to kind of get the opening matchups. To give a bit of an idea and, you know, maybe give myself a tiny advantage in that sense in the decision making. Either way, let's crack into it. Enough sort of waffle, start moving quite quickly. So just going to go down the list. We've got Complexity there opening up against OG. I think it could be a really sort of challenging matchup. Complexity have obviously made some big changes. It was Bucharest where they came top 4, which I think is maybe a bit of an overperformance. It was also an event, you know, that people have picked up on maybe not having, as some of the PGL events this year, not having the biggest names and the scariest team rosters, as it were. So there is space for a team like Complexity to move in. But even the events that they've maybe not done as well at, in terms of an objective placing, people probably expected much weaker performances, having added Sixy and Nick. So, you know, I think that they have, for me, overperformed a little bit this year in a good way. OG, meanwhile, in sort of the tier 2 EU space, because they are unfortunately not getting these partnered invites, they've had to grind a bit more this year as a team, which I think they always should have done. I think the squads that they've had over the years have been a little bit out of their depth, playing against, you know, top 10, top 5 teams in the world. They scratch into the top 30, maybe top 20 when they've got like one of their better squads, but of course when that happens they tend to lose key pieces to bigger teams and whatnot. But they have been playing pretty well, I think, up until recently within the tier 2 space. It was like a 17-18 series winning streak, something like that. You know, they've been doing very, very well, so it's quite a difficult one to call. We're obviously just here to sort of decide. But I think one of these two teams, sort of why I'm spending so much time on it, I think one of these two teams will end up being a 3-0 team. And then I do feel that the other will advance, and a lot of it will come down to this particular matchup, this opening matchup. I'm gonna go EU-wise. I know we're in NA, but I'm going to go with OG as a 3-0. I don't think it's too crazy. Good run of form at the moment. I think they can beat the majority of the teams here. The only one... Complexity's in there, Heroic's in there, maybe Bait as well, who are another team that have been doing pretty well in the tier 2 space. So I'd probably go with OG on the 3-0. So next up, wild card. Kind of similar to Complexity. I think, you know, the two of them have been sort of rivals throughout the year. Let's take the MRQ for NA, for example. It's Complexity and it's wild card in that first, second sort of slot. I guess the way they did it, there wasn't necessarily a winningest team. Maybe not bombing out of tournaments. I think some people might have expected them to do that at the like Katowice, Cluj events like this. They actually did pretty well at Rivals, Blast Rivals. So, you know, another team that I think have the potential to make it through. I'm gonna let them sit for a second before actually putting them anywhere, because we do have a few to get through here, and I realize, you know, I'm taking my time. Heroic, probably one of the keen favorites. They surely have to qualify. I'd love to put them 3-0. But then again, you know, it doesn't count. So I think with Heroic, I will commit. There's not too much to say. You know, they've been making appearances at pretty much every big event at the moment. You know, tiny amount of drama coming into this event might affect them because of the youngster interview before the Falcons game at Dallas and whatnot. But I think a very good squad. They've been moved up, you know, from the tier 2 space. They're performing well, as expected, getting some good finishes, and, you know, this could be a really big breakout sort of moment. And again, as a roster, they are used to working with high stakes and high pressure to really prove themselves, to be like, right, this is our big chance, this is our big, you know, so hopefully they can tap back into that. Yes, they're now more of a solid sort of tier 1 team, but hopefully they can tap back into that for the major, and I think we should see these guys knock on the door for playoffs. 1, maybe 2 really good games from them against bigger names, and yeah, they could be knocking on the door. I'm not saying they're going to make it, but I think they'll get to stage 3, and I think they'll be like one of those teams that either goes through 3-2, or they might go down 2-3. But yeah, I think Heroic are not going to be too worried about this stage. They should make it through. So I'm going to put my money where my mouth is in that sense, and not, you know, OG are a little bit of a, well, maybe they might fluke it. I'm not quite as confident. So that's my, you know, more luck-based 3-0, let's go. Whereas Heroic, as I've said, in this new system, you kind of do have to commit just for your own sanity, right? Because if they go through 3-0 and I put them in the 3-1, I'll be like, oh my God, I should have done it, you know. But if they go through 3-1, I've committed to the 3-0 in my head. I'll be like, all right, well, I was slightly wrong. It's a bit annoying. Thank you, Mr. Valve, but it is what it is. So next team up on the docket would be Bait. Maybe not winning quite as much as they would want out of the tier 2, but it's hard. You know, tier 2 is less and less definable, I suppose, because it's similar to the COVID days. You got a few big teams dipping their toes for the old VRS and whatnot, so, you know, you might end up with an opponent that you really weren't expecting, or that, you know, just sort of outclasses you, or whatever. But they've done a bit of traveling, they've done a bit of ladding this year. I think they can be kind of happy with how they've performed. It's a few of the sort of side lands, as it were, so this is kind of going to be their biggest event of the year for sure, and there's nothing that really comes close, whereas, you know, someone like Heroic have been making appearances at PGL events and things like this. When it comes to the firepower game, I mean, honestly, you know, we've been talking about these guys for a long time. Nothing but improvement. Huge moment from Alex, of course, to get them through, and, you know, shout out Eternal J, one time very well casted. Game got a recognized game. But yeah, and I think these are a crop of players that really should be able to perform in a stage like this. I think they should qualify. I think it will be a bit close. They have had tastes. They do have a few way back in the past, you know, issues, I think, with big games and whatnot. RMRs in particular, you know, they've sort of struggled, but they've finally overcome that boundary, and hopefully they can sort of keep it going. And I think there's a lot of teams in here that they're going to recognize and they're going to be familiar with. You know, I think that hands them a pretty strong advantage going into some of these matchups, and I think that Bait should be able to make it through, so I'll confidently put them in. So we'll start with Bet Boom. Kind of in a weird spot to describe. You know, they're not too far behind, like, OG, it feels like, in terms of games that have been won, but I think they're playing more selectively and, you know, only really chasing tournaments that are going to give them good VRS, so they're actually, like, higher in the rankings. But are they playing better as a team? Maybe, because the competition's a bit higher. Their sort of only LAN this year was Blast Bounty, and they qualified to the LAN finals. Bit of a, you know, weird qualification system, of course, with that, but ultimately they did very well, and I think they are waiting for LAN at the end of the day to really prove themselves, and sometimes they just don't have the extra level. If you look down the list of events and stuff that they've been playing online, there's a lot of 3rd, 4th finishers. Even for the MRQ, for example, they weren't necessarily in the highest level, right? So kind of an interesting case are BetBoom, because the players they have are just incredible, given where their peaks are and whatnot, right? Like, Axile is someone that we always, I think as pundits, we really want this guy to return back to his form, and I just don't know that it's going to happen. But, guys like Magno Jez, guys like Siren are really, really, really exciting prospects. And, Zorte getting a bit of a chance. He's been around for a long, long time. So the fact that they're able to make it work, and, the BetBoom project has been a bit funky and whatnot, this feels like the most successful iteration. Would I say it's the best iteration? Not necessarily, right, in terms of the names they've had in the past. But this one seems to be the iteration that is working the best. I probably am going to leave them a little bit with Wildcard, just because I'm not 100% sure yet as I'm working my way down and sort of convincing myself, as it were. I think the other EU team I mentioned is Namiga. Listen, they were riding a high. They lost Flammus. It didn't really seem to hit them, to be honest with you. More recently, they have struggled a little bit, I think. But look, they have the potential. I think they're going to be another team. There's a couple of them in here that have just been, grinding the tier 2 for so long, chasing the VRS, being very selective with the tournaments, having to play a lot of qualifiers, therefore, to get into the tournament that gives you the VRS. You're not getting any from the qualifier necessarily, because there's no prize pool attached to it. So it's such a grind that I think sometimes, some days you're just going to be going through the motions and the game's a bit difficult. It's the semi-final of a CCT or whatever, and you just sort of get outplayed, and you don't have that next level, that switch that you can flick to take your game to the winning status. And I think that when it comes to the major, it's going to be completely different, isn't it? So there's a lot here, especially when you look at some of the players like Alira, Xanta. I think that those are guys that are like, same shit, different day, man. Like, it's hard to stay motivated in the moment when you are playing against, I don't know, a Wrinkle who is absolutely cracked today and all that sort of stuff. But when you're in that major environment, these are the kinds of teams, Namiga are the kinds of teams that can really just appear out of nowhere and make that deep run. So I think you keep a close eye on a team like this. Khan and Svai, the two most exciting things about this team. Of course, Svai in particular, with his age and, the fact that he was just sort of immediately picked up after losing Flammus and whatnot. So those are the things that you definitely keep your eye on. And I think because of that, I am pretty confident to put Namiga into the advancement. As we're kind of talking about it, I think that BetBoom therefore should also make it in, 'cause, again, I think these two teams are pretty similar, very similar arguments. The only factor being, Namiga lack a bit of experience to facilitate like adaptability. So if they start struggling and, maybe they go down 0-1, 0-2, they lose a close game that they shouldn't have lost, there is also a chance that they might just crumble. So I think it's like their strengths are mechanical, but their weaknesses are pretty mental. But I can still see them making it through on a pretty good day. I am also leaning, this is the bias of like teams that I know, do you know what I mean? Is where my head's maybe voting. So Imperial, one that has been absolutely dominating in the domestic scene. No Furia around, no MIBR around even this year, because they're focusing so much on the VRS chasers and whatnot, to try and keep their rank up and all that. And I think the Brazilian scene on an international level is a little bit of a dangerous one, because if you lose games in Brazil, in South American ECL, for example, you maybe fluff a game to like the lowest team, you're going to lose a lot of VRS. So it's kind of risky, whereas in Europe, they're quite tightly knit, where it's like the highest level team in ECL is going to be, I don't know, rank 30, let's say, on the VRS, and the lowest teams maybe like 75 to 90, whereas there's a few teams in Brazil where they're out of the 100, you know what I mean? So I'm not 100% sure what the point breakdown would be, but I'm sure there's some matchups domestically where you might end up losing like the maximum amount of points possible, unless it's exponential. I don't know. But Imperial dominating domestically, so I think very simply, very quickly, I am going to be confident in these guys. You know, they've obviously got a squad here that has been together for a very long time, should be pretty comfortable. New addition-ish of Che Jesus, but he's such a journeyman of the scene. So I think that given that level, given the experience that they have on this team, I think that they should be able to make it through. It's one that I'm maybe a little bit less confident in, but playing good Counter-Strike at home, not too far for them to travel. I'm sure they'll be excited to get going here. Next one from that region would be Fluxo. Also been doing relatively well. Kind of second fiddle to Imperial, but not too far behind them. You know, either finishing second, couple of firsts that they've like snatched away and stuff on the domestic scene, stuff like that. But I don't know. The roster doesn't excite me too much. I think we have a few players that have had tastes of the higher level, as it were. Art is obviously the biggest name in that sense, but someone like Zevi playing in Pain for a year or so there didn't really result in too much. Kai never really got anyone going, and you know, unfortunately, it's an interesting scene in that sense because they get a few more opportunities to play the international tournaments. Once in a while, a player gets like tested, and everyone's like, "Yeah, domestically he's so good," and then internationally, the game's just completely different, and they can't really perform. So, not necessarily a team that excites me. I'm not going to put them to go through. Obviously, we've only got one spot left, so I have to kind of make a decision. Don't think I'd put them in the 0-3 either. I can definitely see them taking a series somewhere against some of the teams that are left, in fact. So we will move on to those now. And I mean, yeah, let's leave this last spot. There's quite a few teams. Metasport, like the look of them. They're another team doing well in Europe, definitely deserve to be here. I don't know. I think they are lacking just a little bit. They've got some great names that people are going to recognize from many different places, to be fair, you know, many different teams and careers and all this sort of stuff. So they could do some serious damage. There is a chance again with like Hampus and Plopsky at the helm. They could really do some serious damage, but they don't necessarily excite me. It's similar to Fluxo. One of the big issues they have, Lumi, is just not a good enough AWPer for me. The numbers that he puts up, you know, are not really good enough at tier 2 even. So, you know, coming into now the biggest tournament of the season and year so far, I just think they're going to fall short. They're definitely swappable with like a Namiga or someone like this. They could definitely surprise me, but I obviously have to make a few cutthroat decisions. Then we have the likes of FlyQuest coming across from the AP region. Everyone sort of wants to get behind this team. Obviously, they have like an entire country, really. Regali's been a great addition. He's had some fire moments, again, domestically in like the AECL Hero League, I think it's called, that just wrapped up, you know, and stuff like this. I think that they could certainly have some of those individual moments, but their fall off has been the tactical game, the consistency game, and all that. They're generally in for one series of an upset, something like that. So again, going to be a bit close. I think they'll get one, they'll get two, but I don't feel confident enough to put them there. Now, there's a couple teams here that I do feel, and they are a bit wacky and they are a bit funky, but I do feel sort of confident to throw in. The question would be here, folks, which one am I going to choose? So I covered these two quite a bit recently. I did the whole ECL Asia Pacific playoffs. And look, man, I think Tyloo are the better team. They've been winning a lot as well. They didn't win ECL, but they won other domestic competitions that were going on. The aforementioned Heroes League and all that sort of stuff. There was another one in Asia as well that I think they won shortly thereafter in Chengdu. I think that's how you say it, I hope. I think they are the better team. I think firepower-wise, they're better. G, you know, broke hearts at Pro League, but is also a really, really solid AWPer. At least within, again, his own region and all that sort of stuff. The only funny thing is that LinVision seem to have the number of Tyloo whenever they match up. It's always a bit close, but LinVision have been winning it quite a bit. And what I will say, it was a wild final. you know, BO5 and all, weighted, but BO5, I believe we got all 4 maps available, if I'm remembering correctly. And Tyloo must have, you know, thrown, not accusing them of anything, but they definitely should have won like 4 times, you know, and then we went to another overtime, and then they were about to win, and then we went to another overtime, and then it went to another map, and then they should have won there, and they lost, and then it went to another map, and it was overtime, and they should have won, and they lost, you know. So I don't know what was going on, but they could not close the games out, and it did cost them the series. It didn't just cost them 1 map, bounce back, great, good, but, you know, it happens kind of vibe. It cost them the series. So, you know, I don't know if there's something in the team. I don't know if it is the Lin Vision kryptonite that they've got going on. But I'm weary. However, we got to get one in for the boys. And I am going to go Tyloo. I prefer them as a team. And I think that pound for pound, they are the better team. But it would be hella fire if they're playing off against each other in the 2-2 bracket. That would be a great storyline. So I'm pretty happy with the top half here, as it were. Not super confident, but I think they could do it. Play very well in the MRQ, and they've been slowly ramping up. A lot of resources behind that team and everything as well. So I think that they will be very prepared for this one. Heroic, I am fairly confident in them going 3-0. I would be quietly surprised, of course, if they go 3-1. If they even went 3-2, I would be pretty surprised and sort of disappointed. And then these teams, there's a couple in here. There's always a couple where it's like they could swap out Wildcard on good form, which was my complexity argument. Metasport could come in for one of the EU teams. You know, Imperial, I've got a little bit of domestic bias. Tyloo, I've got a bit of domestic bias. Is that going to translate onto this more, you know, European-centric stage? Obviously, we'll find out. Now, in terms of the O3s, the first one I got to go, and it could potentially be a fuck your Pickems angle very quickly, as is often the case, but it does have to be the Chinggis Warriors. Look, they're okay domestically. I think they managed to get like a win against Rare Atom that was a bit of a surprise. Might have been the Huns, actually. You know, just trying to remember rather than looking it up. But they did okay in the regular season. They're definitely towards the top half of the ECL Asia teams. But they're just unable to break through that ceiling. Teams like Tyloo and Lin Vision are a lot closer to doing. Yeah, I don't expect big things. Could be a bit of fun. Could, again, take a series and then fuck your Pickems kind of thing. If they qualify, it would be absolutely insane. But they'll have to be that sort of more confident 0-3 pick angle that I'm going for. Then, I mean, the other teams, you've got like Legacy, as I said at the top of the show, as I'm sure you're aware out there if you're watching this. They've come in to replace Bestia. So that obviously kind of means that they're not a qualification level team, first of all. And second of all, it's all happened a bit quick. So are they going to be prepared? Are they going to be ready? So for me, it's between them. It's maybe between the likes of an NRG. Not, you know, the biggest surprise in the world, but maybe not the team people expected to make it here. Right, there was obviously arguments for some of the other teams, Blue Jays, maybe a Nouns fan favorite kind of vibe, but of course I think the NA scene is a little, yeah. I think I don't want to be harsh because there's a whole situation going on, but I think it just makes the most sense to go 0-3 for Legacy, just because it is that surprise factor. I don't know that they're necessarily the scariest team at the moment domestically and all that sort of stuff. So just all the conflating factors that come together for them, I think. Is not going to do well. I always find the 0-3, especially these days, is a lot harder than it used to be. There was always, it felt like, an obvious couple of teams, even like handful of teams from those side regions where you can just go, yeah, they're not going to beat these EU, you know, firepower machines. But that has all changed in sort of the past 3 or 4 years, I think. And it keeps on getting closer and closer and more competitive. So maybe a bit of a longer one there. I'm not sure how it's going to look in the edit. I'm going to trim bits down, of course, but yeah, a bit of a longer one. Why not? I've not done one of these for a while, or a video for a while, and I'm trying to, as always, get into the groove. But the major is a great time, one of my favorite times of the season, to just sort of see what everyone's picking, keep track. Will we get diamond? I've lost a bit of confidence. I'm not going to lie. The past couple of coins have been hard. So everyone usually is like, diamond recipe, watch me. But I bet those kinds of titles are going to be much rarer. I think everyone's going to have had their confidence knocked by this new system we've had for a few majors now. All the same, thank you very much for watching, guys. If you have made it to the end here, very much appreciated. And do all the usual stuff. Give us a like, give us a sub, give us a comment. Let's get the conversation going, and I'll see you in the next one.